There's no doubt that we have a problem with motor traffic congestion, but there's also no doubt about what the solutions are. It's more transit, that's number one, more cycling, more walking, better urban planning. So we know what the solutions are.
Welcome to Calling All Stations, the Transport Podcast. I'm Christian Walmer, an author and journalist who has covered transport for the past 30 years. In every episode, we try to keep you up to date with the most engaging news stories, policy developments, and interviews in the transport world. And with me is my regular co-presenter, Mark Walker, who has spent decades looking at transport policies and legislation. So, Mark, what have we got on today?
Hello, Christian, and hello to our listeners. You've been on your travels again, first of all within London to the UK Parliament, where you've been interviewing Kat Hobbs from We Own It, who's the author of a report with her organisation suggesting that the boundaries for public ownership of Britain's railways should be widened. You've also been much further afield to Toronto in Canada, where you've been learning from Albert Koehl about a culture war there over the suggested removal of cycle lanes throughout the city. Listeners will know that the UK Labour government has decided to return much of Britain's railway industry to public ownership, in particular the train operating companies, which have been franchised for the last 30 years or so. However, there's an organisation called We Own It that thinks that Labour should go further in expanding the remit of the public sector within the UK's railways. And Christian has been speaking to Kat about the report that they just published in Parliament.
I've just been at an event in Parliament really campaigning to get Great British Railways on the right path, as it were. And I'm joined by Kat Hobbs of We Own It, who's going to explain to us exactly what we've been doing here.
Hi, Christian, and thank you for being here. So we're at Parliament today. We Own It. The We Own It team is here with experts, including obviously Christian Wilmot and other campaigners, and I'll list those. We've got Emily from the Association of British Commuters. We've got Ellie from Bring Back British Rail. We've got Dr. Grace Brown, who is a bit of an expert on rolling stock. And we've got Jonathan Tyler, who is an expert on timetabling. And of course, Christian. And we're all here to talk about the Railways Bill.
And you've been lobbying MPs here. You've been having quite a steady stream of MPs to talk to.
Yeah, that's right. So we asked We Own It supporters to email their MPs and say, please come to this event in Parliament, come and hear from Christian and others, and I think you were a major draw, come and hear from these experts about how we make public ownership of the railway really successful. And we gathered from what MPs said that they had received a lot of emails from constituents, and so they turned up. We had plenty of Labour MPs, a lot of Lib Dems, a couple of Conservatives, and they had obviously been prompted to come to this conversation, and they thought it was important to be here, and there were some quite engaged conversations. We probably had, I would say, at least 30 MPs.
So what are your precise demands? What are you actually asking for? Because, Great British Railways is happening. The bill, as I understand it, will definitely be tabled sometime in the autumn. It will give quite strong powers to Great British Railways. So what are the things that you're really trying to press for here?
So we think public ownership is a good idea. So do most people. So do most voters, actually, across all political parties support public ownership. But we don't think, we think it's also important to think about how do you make public ownership really successful? Because just bringing the rail franchises into public hands as they come up for renewal without a bigger vision, a bigger plan, and thinking about the other policies that need to be in place is really politically risky for the government. It could go really badly wrong, and I think we're already starting to see some of the potential fallout from that. So what we're saying is, look, this is a really historic opportunity that the government's got right now. We're seeing that we're really grateful, we're really pleased that they're ending this 30 years of rail privatisation, bringing franchises into public ownership. That is great. That's a real achievement. It's the right thing. But that by itself is not going to automatically lead to a really high quality, tip-top, fantastic railway that passengers are really keen to use.
Okay, so can you be a bit more specific? Yes. That's very general. Yeah. So give us some examples of where you think GBR might be failing and what you'd like to see. Yeah,
absolutely. So what we're trying to do here is start a kind of national conversation, really, to say, what do campaigners and experts want to do? So we've got a document called Passengers Not Profit, a Vision for the Railways Bill. We've got contributions in that document from yourself, Christian, and from these other experts that I mentioned. And the policies that we are calling for are, we want the rolling stock to be publicly owned. Right now, as I'm sure you've covered before, but the rolling stock companies are the most profitable bit of the railway, and the government has no plans to take them into public ownership, which means effectively we don't own our own trains.
But that would cost an enormous amount of money to buy them back.
Well, what we're saying is, on the government set up Great British Energy, why not set up something like Great British Trains and have a plan for, as trains are decommissioned, have a plan for the new trains to be publicly owned.
So you wouldn't be suggesting buying up the existing stock?
We think they should look at what to do about it. So, and Scotland's already doing this a bit. So Dr. Grace Brown wrote a report which I think was arranged by ASLEF for the Scottish Government, saying, what's the waste here? What's the money that could be reinvested back into making better services from rolling stock, from those trains? And so the Scottish Government is looking at their options. And we think Westminster should be doing the same. What are the options? Maybe buying them out. I mean, we actually think, there's a bit of a blind spot with the government where actually, if you buy an asset, and if that asset is profitable, then that asset comes to you. That is a good thing, and we shouldn't count that as being a cost that we can't afford. But at the same time, there's different ways of doing it, and they should be planning for it. We shouldn't continue this rolling stock rip-off ever-endingly into the future.
Okay, so that's rolling stock. What are the other aspects you're particularly focused on?
So another important one is the passenger voice. So what we're saying is, if you think about workers, they have unions to defend their interests, but who do passengers have? If you're upset with the new publicly owned railway, or if you've got ideas to improve it, how do you get your voice heard? What's the mechanism? Because, rail is a natural monopoly. That's part of why it's been not working in private hands. But we actually need accountability to be built into the system. So what we're saying is, turn Transport Focus into a democratically accountable body. When you buy your ticket, you get to vote for your representatives, and then they sit on the board or the relevant boards of Great British Railways to actually feed in that passenger perspective. Because, that just isn't there right now, and it needs to be built in so that our voice can be heard. And so you've got a constituency of people saying, rail is really important, invest in rail. Every pound invested in rail produces £2.50 in economic benefits. Passengers pushing for that helps to get it over the line politically.
So basically that one is about democratising Transport Focus and changing its structure.
That's our proposal, and we think, if you think about boards that hold companies accountable, so, public ownership, it doesn't mean the minister's just in charge from a department somewhere. As you talk about, you have professionals running the railway, that's the way to do it. But who holds those professionals accountable? What we're saying is public ownership should mean the public is represented in that. So you have passengers, you have workers, and you also have other civil society groups who are represented in a board that is holding the company accountable for delivering for those groups and the broad public.
Okay, so that's rolling stock and passengers. What other aspects are you campaigning on?
So I think the other main aspect is around competition law and open access. And so, as you know, what we've seen with the railway franchises coming into public hands is that there's been a lot of almost aggressive open access applications from the private sector who are desperate to cling on to their profits. But our view is you don't actually get the benefits of public ownership if you carry on prioritising competition law. What you need to do is prioritise economic, social, environmental benefit accessibility, all of that stuff, run the railway for the benefit of passengers, plan it for the benefit of passengers, plan the timetable for our benefit, and you can also have cross-subsidy, where the more profitable routes can fund to socially necessary services. That's an efficient way to run a network, planning it in that way, and you don't get that if you have a total hodgepodge of private and public. That's really a messy way to do it. The government should have a vision and deliver that vision.
Why do you think that can't be done partly by, say, open access operators?
Well, our understanding is open access operators are effectively leeching off the system. They don't pay for a lot of the costs that the other operators do. So they don't pay as much for depots, for training staff. So effectively, they are creaming off the profits. And that's, our argument that we own it is that is what private companies do. And that's a logical thing to do if you can get away with it. Working for your private shareholders, you cherry pick the most profitable bits of any public service, you run those bits, and then you say, look, we're doing a really good job. Okay, but you're cherry picking. If you allow cherry picking in a service, that's a messy, inefficient service. What you want to do is run it as a public service, get professionals involved in collaborating with each other, because collaboration is a key benefit. Don't pretend that we can have competition and have public ownership at the same time. They're two different models.
Does that apply to ticket retailing as well? Do you think that ought to be controlled entirely by GBR?
Yes, it does. And I think, the government could look at creating a really fantastic ticket retailer, copying best practice from other countries, so that passengers have a really brilliant option that they know they can rely on, and they know it's not creaming profits out of the system. And, they could potentially look at buying out Trainline, the UK operations, but they don't have to. They could just create something really, really good. But now is the time to be thinking about what that looks like.
You don't think that people like Trainline have stimulated more people to use the trains?
I think Trainline is a decent service, and I also think it's extracting quite a lot of profit. I think there's this idea that the only way we can possibly have any innovation is if we have the private sector involved. That's just not true, and that's a big part of why we were really very happy to have you here today, Christian, to say, look, innovation happens in the public sector. What you do is you have professionals, you give them freedom to experiment, to innovate, to look at what can be done commercially, to run things for passengers. You also have the passenger accountability built in. We can use the best practice from other countries, like Germany, like France, see what's being done well in Europe and around the world, and build on that. But I think, let's actually recognise that the public sector can innovate. And the government is actually doing a bit of that. There was an announcement this week about work they were doing with Innovate UK, which is a public sector agency. Let's recognise that humans everywhere actually have ingenious ideas, good ways forward, and let's free up the public sector to make sure it can be innovative, but for public benefit.
Well, that's a great place to end it, Kat. Thank you very much for that, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Many listeners will be familiar with the Constitution of the United States and the 50 states that make up the Union. We're perhaps a bit less familiar with the Constitution of Canada, which has 10 provinces and 3 territories. One of the provinces is Ontario, and a large city within Ontario is the city of Toronto. And Christian has visited Toronto in the last few days, learning about a culture war between the city government and the provincial government about the provision of cycle lanes. And he's been speaking to Albert Koehl. And here's his interview.
I'm in Toronto, where there's an enormous controversy over the fact that the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, wants to rip out the cycle lanes that have been installed over the years by the local mayor. And indeed, it has some resonance, I think, with things that might happen similar things that might happen in the UK when you get an authority taking over from one that has installed cycle lanes. and it's something that I thought would be very relevant to discuss on this podcast. And with me, I've got Albert Koehl, who is a cycling advocate in Toronto, and he's been obviously campaigning against this, but he's also been a long-time cycling advocate. So thank you, Albert, for coming on Calling All Stations. Just start me off saying, I think you became a cycling advocate a bit by mistake, didn't you?
That's right. So in 2007, we had this idea. It would be great to have bike lanes on Bloor Street. So Bloor Street is one of our principal east-west arterial. It has a subway below it. It's a relatively flat surface, and it'll get you from one side of the city to the other, connecting to a street called Danforth. So it seemed to me it would be a great idea, and a lot of people said it would be a great idea to have a bike lane on here, but the many other people, and the majority, would say, well, it's not realistic. So we started initially in terms of our advocacy in 2007, having bike parades, big bike parades. First it was 500, 1,000, 2,000 people. And we thought we'd show City Hall how much people would really enjoy a bike lane. However, it took a lot longer to do that. So it took another decade almost to get a pilot project in place, a short pilot project, 2.4 kilometers, close to the university, close to the Royal Ontario Museum, where we're sitting now. A lot of restaurants, a lot of places to go. And that was a big success. And we thought once that was in place, we'd get the rest of it quickly.
So that was just 2.5 kilometers out of what? How long was it?
We're talking about a route that's over 20 kilometers long, east-west.
Right.
So we got that in place. It was very popular. It was the transportation manager at the time said it was the most comprehensively studied road project in North America. So then we thought once that was in place, it's going to be easy getting the rest of it.
And
it took a long time. It took the pandemic to get the next extension, and then it took several more years to get a couple more years to get the next extension, which went into Etobicoke. And Etobicoke is more of a suburban area, and for our conversation, what makes it particularly relevant, it is the area that the current premier, Doug Ford, that's his constituency. So he obviously was listening then to the opponents, which was a minority, but a strong, loud, brash, wealthy opposition that said nobody wants these bike lanes, which wasn't true, but he certainly listened to them. So he's the premier, but his own ward or riding is in the Etobicoke area. So then he came out and said, we're ripping out these bike lanes as well as two of the other most popular bike lanes, which probably not coincidentally are found between his home in Etobicoke and Queen's Park, which is our legislature.
So take me a little bit further back than that, just to say, is cycling a big thing in Toronto? Has it been a big thing? And what has been the impact of having these cycle lanes? Has it actually boosted cycling?
Yeah, well, cycling in Toronto goes back to the 1890s. Obviously, there was a darker period for cycling in the 70s and 80s after World War II. So where we install bike lanes in Toronto, they are well used. So recently, for example, on Bloor Street, we did a count and found that during the course of a day, about 43% of all vehicles in the central city on Bloor Street were bicycles. And during the rush hour period of 5 to 7 on a particular day, the bicycles outnumbered the number of motor vehicles. Not by a huge margin, by a small margin, but that trend is still increasing. So we're talking about on that particular day with 9,000, over 9,000 cyclists. So a well-used bike lane, and that is our experience in Toronto. Where bike lanes are installed, people use them.
But so, what is the argument of the opponents? I mean, try and present that honestly. What is their actual kind of complaint about this?
So context, right? So our premier did run for mayor, and a lot of people do say that he still wants to be the mayor. Right. That is a major objective. So as premier, it played very well to an audience outside of Toronto, sort of in the Toronto region, to say that we've got terrible congestion, motor traffic congestion, which is true.
Right.
And the next step, the great leap that he took, which played very well politically, is to say, and the reason we have congestion is because of bike lanes. So we're going to rip out those bike lanes, and that will then help solve the congestion problem.
Right. And you disagree with that?
That's well, we know what the things that solve motor traffic congestion.
Right.
They're making driving more expensive, putting in better mass transit, things like congestion charges. Those are the things that actually deal with congestion. So the things we've seen our premier doing recently are making driving cheaper. He's reduced the gas tax, reduced tolls on a bigger one of the bigger highways.
Oh, right.
Eliminated tolls.
Right.
Eliminated tolls on one of our big highways. He's attacked bike lanes. He attacks things as well, like speed cameras. In other words, he is a premier who champions the cause of the motorist.
I did see on television there was a piece about how all the speed cameras have been toppled and cut down. Is that right?
Yeah, many of the speed cameras, which we know are effective based on the research and evidence, they are effective, but some of them are being cut down, and they're being cut down regularly on a street where there are thousands of tickets being issued each month by these speed cameras.
Right. So where are you with your campaign? Does the Premier of Ontario actually have the power to remove these cycle lanes?
Yes, well, that's the difficulty that cities have, is that they are the creature of the province. The province makes the rules. Traditionally, it's been left to cities to decide where to put bike lanes. It's up to cities where to put speed cameras. This premier, however, has said, no, I'm going to make it my business. Bike lanes are going to be my business, and I'm taking out these bike lanes. And he's also, by the way, said, we don't want these speed cameras. They're a tax grab. So even though cities have found they work have worked quite well
in reducing road deaths,
reducing road deaths. So right now, where we're at with the ripping out bike lanes, which the premier has been championing, which is, as I say, a political ploy. It plays very well outside of the city of Toronto. He was then challenged in court by our cycling advocacy group here in Toronto called Cycle Toronto. The court decided that it was an infringement of Section 7 of our Charter of Rights to take out the bike lanes because it infringes the right to life and security of the person.
You mean, in other words, it makes it more dangerous for people, so therefore it's illegal?
That's the evidence.
Right.
The evidence showed clearly, and the evidence that the premier had, his own experts were telling him that taking out bike lanes will cause more collisions, cause more death and injury, and he ignored that evidence. This is not about evidence. The evidence tells us bike lanes are good. The evidence tells us bike lanes reduce congestion, reduce danger. He ignored all of that evidence. And the court, it was one of the reasons the court said, well, you not only deprived people who ride bikes of the right to security of the person and life, you also did this without any evidence. In other words, it was arbitrary, your conduct.
So where are we at now? I mean, have you won, or is this a temporary hold?
So at the initial court level, the court said it was an infringement of the Charter of Rights, and that this deprivation of the right to life and security of the person was done contrary to the principles of fundamental justice. So that's been the court ruling. Of course, our premier has appealed that ruling and will now go to our Court of Appeal. So that matter's pending. But in the interim, the bike lanes cannot be removed.
Right. And is it actually feasible? I just saw the bike lane, and it's a fairly hefty and looks very successful construction. So removing it would cost a lot of money, but for a start, wouldn't it?
Yes, and that's exactly the problem. In some areas of Bloor Street, The bike lanes are what we call permanent bike lanes. In other words, there are raised curbs, there's a pavement for the bike lane. In other places, there are what we call temporary measures. There'd be cement curbs with bollards, simply sort of indicating where the bike lane is. So in this area, we've just finished construction. It took 2 years of construction to reconstruct the roads, to make the bike lanes permit, to do some water main work. So it would take probably a year or more to reconstruct the road. So probably the Premier is not really going to do that, but a lot of it, as I say, is political posturing. It plays very well to the audience that he's appealing to, which is an audience outside of the City of Toronto. In the City of Toronto, the surveys make clear people want bike lanes, they want wider sidewalks, they want lower speed limits, they want people on bikes and pedestrians to be safe, because that is about almost around 50% of trips are walk, cycle, and transit.
I did notice also as I was walking through that there's some new cycle lanes just a little bit south of here being built. Is that right?
Yeah, there are. The bicycle network in Toronto is still short of a network. It's we have a lot of newer bike lanes. We don't yet have a network that crosses the entire city. It's patchy, and that's what what the city has. Ambition has been to complete the network. We still have a long way to go there, and of course all of these battles, they're still battles. In other words, we still do the full public consultation on each bike lane. We still ask the public what they think. We still on each of these extensions, so that slows things down. And given that we're running out of time on issues like climate change, on road safety, each of delays really prevent us from reaching our ambitions and dealing with these urgent problems.
I know we call them culture wars in Britain. Just tell me a bit of how you got into this, because I looked at your website and it seems that you kind of got in there. You didn't really intend to become a cycling advocate, but you become one.
That's right. Initially, my thought, well, all we need to do is show City Hall.
Right.
How popular cycling is, and they will install the bike lane.
I must say you're slightly naive then.
And that's exactly it. We thought, just show City Hall. Look at all these people love. We wanted to give City Hall a glimpse of what our city could look like with more cycling, with bike lanes, and we thought that's what should be such a simple thing. It's so fun to ride your bike. It's enjoyable. It's affordable.
It's
clean.
It's
all of those things.
All this stuff. Yeah. It also gets you quicker around. I mean, I cycle because I know I can get to my business meetings more efficiently than any other means, despite the fact we have very good transit.
We talk a lot about affordability.
Right.
But when it comes to affordable things like better transit, better walking, better cycling, that seems to be some of the politicians will draw the line there. Talk about affordability, but when it comes to push comes to shove, they'll still prefer cars and car travel, despite all of the things we know about the damage that a car-based system does.
I must say, I have been stuck in some of your traffic jams driving out to where I was filming in Palmerston, and I was astonished at how bad the traffic is out by the airport and stuff. I mean, it's all stop and go. It's pretty chaotic.
There's no doubt that we have a problem with motor traffic congestion, but there's also no doubt about what the solutions are. It's more transit, that's number one, more cycling, more walking, better urban planning. So we know what the solutions are. Unfortunately, we act almost like, or I'll say our politicians, like adolescents. In other words, we know what the answer is, but we don't want to accept it. So we go back to the things that have failed over many years and do the same things and expect a different result.
Okay, so last question then. Are you going to win this? Do you think that they would ever dare to rip out these cycle lanes? Are you going to get more cycle lanes? How do you see the future the next year or two or three?
Well, I think their trajectory is clear. In other words, better transit, better walking, better cycling. That trajectory is clear, and globally. Whether you look at London, you look at Paris, that trajectory is clear. All that our Premier will do is slow that down, as his brother, Rob Ford, when he was mayor, did, slowed it down. But the trajectory is clear because we know what works. We know based on the research, we know based on the experience, what doesn't work. So one thing many of our politicians are not willing to say is the fundamental problem is the monstrous inefficiency of trying to move people from A to B in these large and growing vehicles. We have this trend toward large oversized.
I did notice that. So many SUVs, about half the cars are SUVs.
So what we see now is we see a increasing number of these large vehicles. So it's again a part of this adolescent attitude that we just don't want to accept that we have a problem. But the fundamental problem is not the bike lanes. And the fundamental problem is that we have too many cars. And until we accept that's the problem, and the inefficiency of trying to move people from A to B in a motor vehicle that weighs 1,000 or 2,000 kilograms, that's a big problem.
Well, thank you, Albert. That's absolutely a great summary of culture wars in Canada. So thank you very much for coming on Calling All Stations.
Thanks for the invitation to chat.
Pleasure.
So I think, Christian, you identified in that interview with Albert how culture wars around transport policy are a worldwide phenomenon, not just something that we have in the UK.
Yes, indeed. And there's something depressing about that in a way. But I thought the relevance of this was that, we might well get this sort of thing here. And in fact, we had to some extent with Rishi Sunak kind of being inspired by winning the Uxbridge by-election, where the ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone, was quite an important factor. And he thought that it was this decisive factor. I thought he was wrong about that. But so then he went on to try to use the so-called war on the motorist as a wider part of Tory policy, and in particular kind of trying to limit local councils from imposing low traffic neighbourhoods. 20-hour speed limits in Wales came under fire, and it was all an attempt for central government to stop local government from doing things that actually not only do local people actually like, as in certainly the case in Toronto that we've just heard, but also that we know that most of these measures to make towns and cities more livable are actually good for the local economies as well. So I just find it so depressing that, I go, halfway around the world to find the same old battles, the same Neanderthal politicians making the same ridiculous statements when all the evidence points in another direction.
Here's Christian's final thought from the Departure Lounge.
Well, it's not quite from the Departure Lounge. It's from King's Cross Station, where a listener has taken the trouble while he was waiting for a train, which was delayed, and he was there for 10 minutes in King's Cross Station, in which time he was had to face 11 announcements about various things, and some of it was about do not skateboard, do not cycle, be careful of the platforms in inclement weather, mind the gap between the train and the platform. And very little of it was of any use to people who wanted information about their trains or about delays or about anything else. They have to actually just cope with looking at the notice board rather than kind of actually being informed by these announcements. And it's just noise. So he actually asked a question with freedom of information, saying, had they done any research on, the effectiveness of these announcements and how often they should be, and how effective would it be if there were more of them or fewer of them or whatever? And answer came that nobody has done any research into the effectiveness or how one should frame them, how often one should use them, or so on. So we just get bombarded with these things, and it's really up to the local station staff to decide how often we have to listen to see it, say it, see it, sorted.
Calling All Stations, the Transport Podcast with Christian Walmart, is produced by Cogitamus Limited, a leading provider of public affairs consultancy services in the sector. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please consider giving us a 5-star rating with whichever platform you use. Do follow us on social media channels, including Blue Sky, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle on X is @AllStationsPod.